Hello, and welcome to Dream Deception. If you could consider liking this video and subscribing, I would greatly appreciate it. It helps me keep going to create these types of spooky, horrifying, and scary videos. Alright, let's get to the stories.
The house was eerily silent after my parents left for their week-long vacation. They had assured me everything would be fine, but I couldn't shake the feeling of unease that settled over me as I watched their car disappear down the road. To make things less creepy, I invited my best friend Jake to stay over. We planned to spend the night binge-watching horror movies and devouring junk food, a perfect way to stave off any lingering anxiety. The evening started off great. We laughed at the cheesy special effects in old horror films and argued over who would survive in a zombie apocalypse. The tension that had gripped me earlier faded as the familiar comfort of Jake's presence filled the room. By midnight, we were both sprawled on the couch, half asleep, when a sudden noise snapped us awake. It was a low, muffled thud coming from the basement. Jake sat up, his eyes wide. "Did you hear that?"
I nodded, my heart beginning to race. Probably just the house settling, I said, trying to convince myself as much as him. But even as I spoke, another thud echoed up from below, followed by a faint scraping sound.
We exchanged uneasy glances. "Maybe we should check it out," Jake suggested, though his voice lacked conviction.
"Yeah, sure," I replied, my mouth dry. I grabbed the flashlight from the kitchen drawer, and together we made our way to the basement door.
The door creaked open, revealing the narrow staircase leading down into the darkness. The light switch at the top of the stairs flickered when I tried it, then went out completely. "Great," I muttered, flicking on the flashlight.
The beam of light cut through the darkness, illuminating the cluttered space below. The air was colder down here, and the familiar musty smell of old wood and damp stone greeted us as we descended. Each step creaked under our weight, and the noises from before seemed to have stopped, replaced by an almost deafening silence.
"Probably just a rat or something," Jake whispered, but his voice was tight with apprehension. At the bottom of the stairs, the flashlight revealed rows of old boxes, forgotten furniture, and dusty shelves. Everything appeared normal, yet the oppressive feeling of being watched hung in the air. I moved the light around, scanning the room, when a sudden flicker of movement caught my eye.
"Did you see that?" I hissed, pointing the beam toward the far corner of the basement.
"Yeah," Jake whispered, stepping closer to me. We approached the corner cautiously, the flashlight trembling in my hand. There, behind an old armoire, was a small, rusted door I had never noticed before. "What the hell?" I breathed. "I've lived here my whole life and never seen this." Jake reached out and tugged on the door handle, but it wouldn't budge. "It's locked." The scraping sound returned, louder this time, coming from behind the door. It was followed by a low, guttural moan that sent a shiver down my spine. We both stumbled back, heartbeats thundering in our ears.
"We should go back upstairs," I said, my voice shaking. "Maybe call someone."
But before we could move, the door creaked open slightly, revealing a sliver of darkness beyond. A foul stench wafted out, making us both gag. The moaning grew louder, more insistent.
"Screw this," Jake muttered, pulling out his phone to call for help, but there was no signal. Damn it. The door swung open wider, and from the darkness emerged a figure, hunched and shrouded in shadow. Its eyes gleamed with a sickly yellow light, and its long, clawed hands scraped against the doorframe. It let out a guttural snarl, the sound reverberating through the basement. "Run!" I screamed, grabbing Jake's arm. We bolted up the stairs, slamming the basement door behind us. I locked it, my hands trembling as I fumbled with the latch.
We stood there panting, staring at the door. The sounds from below continued, the creature's growls and the scraping of claws against wood. The house seemed to close in around us, the once familiar walls now feeling like a prison.
"What the hell was that?" Jake whispered, his face pale. "I don't know," I replied, my mind racing. "But we need to get out of here."
We grabbed our coats and headed for the front door. But as we reached it, the lights flickered and went out, plunging the house into darkness. To our horror, we heard the unmistakable sound of the basement door creaking open.
"Go! Go! Go!"
I yelled, throwing open the front door. We sprinted out into the night, the cold air biting at our skin. Behind us, the house loomed, dark and silent, but we could still hear the creature's growls echoing in the distance. We ran down the street, not stopping until we were far from the house. Breathless and terrified, we finally collapsed on a bench under a street lamp. Jake pulled out his phone again, this time managing to get a signal. He called the police, explaining that there was someone in the house.
When the police arrived, they searched the house from top to bottom but found nothing unusual. The basement was just as we had left it, and the strange door was gone, leaving only a blank wall where it had been. "Are you sure you saw something?" one of the officers asked, a skeptical look on his face.
"Yes," I insisted, though even as I spoke, I felt the reality of what we had seen slipping away, like a fading dream. There was a creature and it came out of the basement. The officers exchanged glances but didn't press the issue. They chalked it up to a prank or an overactive imagination. But Jake and I knew the truth. We had seen something that defied explanation. After the police left, we sat in silence, too afraid to go back inside. The house, once a place of comfort and safety, now felt like a dark, malevolent force. We spent the rest of the night in the car, the headlights trained on the house, waiting for dawn to break. When morning came, the house looked normal again, almost inviting. But the memories of the night before were too vivid to ignore. We packed our things and left, vowing never to return. My parents were furious when they found out we had abandoned the house, but I couldn't explain it to them. How could I? They would never believe what we had seen.
Years later, I can't shake the feeling that something is still down there, lurking in the shadows, waiting.
Story 2.
When my family moved into the old Victorian house, I couldn't shake the feeling that we had stepped into a place that time had forgotten, and perhaps for good reason. My mom was ecstatic, enamored with the house's charm. The ornate woodwork, the grand staircase, and the tall arch windows. My dad was thrilled about the investment potential. My younger brother, Max, thought it was the coolest place ever, with its hidden nooks and crannies. But for me, the house exuded an unsettling vibe, like the walls themselves were watching us. The first few nights in the house were restless. Every creak and groan of the old wood made me jump. But what disturbed me most was the basement. It was cold, damp, and filled with an almost tangible darkness. At the far end of the basement was a door, heavy and made of dark wood with an iron handle. Unlike the other doors in the house, this one was locked, seemingly from the other side. The lock was old and rusted, as if it hadn't been opened in decades.
My curiosity about the locked room grew each day, but so did my unease. One evening, while my parents were out shopping and Max was absorbed in his video games, I decided to explore the basement. Armed with a flashlight, I crept down the creaky wooden stairs, the cold air wrapping around me like a shroud. The basement smelled of earth and mildew, a scent that grew stronger the closer I got to the locked door. I ran my fingers over the rough wood, wondering what secrets it concealed. The flashlight beam danced over the door, revealing faint scratches on the wood. as if someone, or something, had tried to claw its way out. My heart pounded in my chest as I pressed my ear against the door, straining to hear any sound from the other side. At first, there was nothing but the distant hum of the house's pipes. Then, faintly, I heard it. A soft, rhythmic tapping, like fingernails rapping against wood. I stumbled back, nearly dropping the flashlight. My mind raced with possibilities, none of them comforting. Before I could decide what to do, the sound stopped, leaving behind an oppressive silence. I bolted up the stairs, slamming the basement door shut behind me. That night, I lay in bed, my heart racing, ears straining for any sound from below. The house was silent, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me. Over the next few days, the atmosphere in the house grew heavier. My mom noticed my discomfort, but brushed it off as an adjustment period. "You'll get used to it," she said with a smile. My dad was too busy with work to notice, and Max remained oblivious, lost in his games. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong, especially when I started hearing whispers at night, faint and indistinct, like a distant conversation. One afternoon, while my parents were out and Max was at a friend's house, I decided to confront my fears. I found an old set of keys in the kitchen drawer, and with a mix of dread and determination, made my way back to the basement. The air grew colder as I descended, the familiar scent of damp earth filling my nostrils. My hands trembled as I tried key after key, each one refusing to fit the lock. Just as I was about to give up, the last key slid in smoothly. With a click, the lock released, and the door creaked open, revealing a darkness deeper than the rest of the basement. I hesitated, my flashlight barely piercing the inky blackness beyond the door. The room was small, its walls lined with shelves filled with dusty jars and decaying books. In the center of the room stood an old wooden table, upon which lay a tattered journal. I picked it up, my fingers leaving smudges on the dusty cover. As I flipped through the pages, a chill ran down my spine. The journal was filled with ramblings about spirits and rituals, accompanied by unsettling sketches of shadowy figures and strange symbols. One entry caught my eye. March 3rd, 1901. I hear them at night, whispering from the shadows. They watch, always watching. The ritual must be completed to seal them away, but the cost is too great. I can feel their eyes on me, even now. The more I read, the more a sense of dread filled me. The previous owner of the house had been involved in something dark, something that had left its mark on the very foundation of the home. As I set the journal down, the tapping started again, louder this time, echoing from the walls of the small room. I backed out of the room, heart pounding, and slammed the door shut, locking it behind me. The whispers grew louder, as if angry at being disturbed. I raced up the stairs, but the door at the top wouldn't budge. The whispers turned to screams, filling my ears with a cacophony of voices. I banged on the door, shouting for help, but the house seemed to swallow my cries. Suddenly the door flew open, and I stumbled into the kitchen, gasping for breath. The house was silent again. The oppressive atmosphere lifted, but I knew I had awakened something that couldn't be easily put back to rest. I ran to my room, locking the door behind me, and sat on my bed trembling. That night, the whispers returned, louder than ever, and I knew they wouldn't stop until they were satisfied. The next morning, I tried to tell my parents, but they dismissed my fears as an overactive imagination. Max laughed it off, calling me a scaredy cat. But I could see the unease in my mom's eyes, a flicker of doubt that hinted she felt something too. Determined to find a solution, I returned to the basement with Jake, who had come over after hearing my frantic call. We armed ourselves with flashlights and a crowbar, ready to face whatever lay behind that door. The air grew colder as we descended, the whispers returning to taunt us. With a deep breath, I unlocked the door, and we stepped into the dark room together. The whispers grew louder, and the symbols on the walls seemed to pulse with a faint, red light. Jake's face was pale, but he didn't back down. We approached the table, and I picked up the journal, flipping to the last entry. March 7th, 1901. They demand a sacrifice. Only then will they be satisfied. I fear what will happen if I refuse. Their hunger is endless.
As I read the words, the whispers turned into a deafening roar, and the room began to shake. The jars on the shelves shattered, their contents spilling onto the floor. A shadowy figure emerged from the darkness, its form shifting and writhing like smoke. Its eyes glowed with a malevolent light, and its mouth twisted into a grin that sent a wave of terror through me. Jake and I stumbled back, but the door slammed shut, trapping us inside. The figure advanced, its twisted limbs reaching for us. In a desperate bid to protect ourselves, I grabbed a book from the shelf and hurled it at the creature. The book burst into flames upon contact, and the creature let out a shriek of pain. "The symbols!" Jake shouted, pointing to the walls. "We need to destroy them!" We grabbed anything we could find and began to scrub the symbols from the walls, the red light net dimming with each one erased. The creature's screams grew louder, its form flickering like a dying flame. As the last symbol faded, the figure let out one final, agonized scream before dissolving into the darkness. The room fell silent, the oppressive atmosphere lifting. The door creaked open, and we stumbled out into the basement, gasping for breath. The whispers were gone, the house silent once more. We never spoke of that night again, but the scars it left remained, a reminder of the darkness that had once lurked within our home. The house seemed to settle into a peaceful quiet, but sometimes, late at night, I could still feel the echoes of those whispers.